Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Kamler. You've seen our next guest on YouTube, MTV, Comedy Central, and MSNBC, and now you can read her in a book, Franchesca Ramsey's Well, That Escalated Quickly, Memoirs and Mistakes of an Accidental Activist, is on shelves today, and she's here to talk about it with us. Everybody, please give a round of applause for Franchesca Ramsey.
Hey, it's real.
Hey, today, right?
Yes,
Out today.
Oh my goodness.
How's it been going for you? How's the whole process been of writing a book?
It is exciting. It's tumultuous. It's exhausting. I had many nights that I was waking up in a cold sweat, like, why did I tell that story? Oh my gosh, this was a mistake. But I'm really hoping that by being just honest and transparent about the things that I've learned and the mistakes that I've made, that people will laugh and cringe and also be a little self-reflective as well.
You've always been fairly honest and upfront about your personal life, though, as much as you were.
Yeah, maybe a little bit too much sometimes.
You think so?
I mean, I think the internet is amazing in terms of the accessibility that it gives people, and it's really, for me, been so great for my career when it comes to removing some of those gatekeepers. But I do think sometimes we have to be careful about how much we share and the way that we share, because, you know, the internet gives us a perspective on people that isn't necessarily the full picture. And I think social media specifically, which is something I talk about a lot in the book, where we see this perfect glossy picture of someone's life, and that's not necessarily what it always is. And looking back on my personal journey, I've realized that there were times where I wasn't necessarily being completely honest with myself in terms of how I presented myself online. Or
well, it's so hard because you were not only doing this because it was sort of something that you felt like doing, but you also wanted a career. And at a certain point,
absolutely,
you saw the possibility to build a career off of something that was kind of an accident. So you're in this weird place where you're like, how do I present myself in the best way, but also how do I keep a fan base?
Absolutely. How do I stay true to myself, but also, especially when there are so many important conversations being had around race and identity and things that are happening in the news and pop culture. It's like you want to chime in, but then you're also like, I still want to have a job at some point. So,
well, I think one of the great chapters in the book about that is your, it's not a fight, but your conversation, or the conversations that you had about Lena Dunham and that you had publicly. This is a very successful writer, director who has
and someone who has put her foot in her mouth
a lot,
so many times. And I feel like it is so important that we use our platforms to talk about the way brands or celebrities or TV shows or movies are misrepresenting marginalized people. But I personally realized that I was doing myself and the conversations a disservice the way that I talked about things with certain people. I find that sometimes there are people that I really look up to and I respect, and I am disappointed when, you know, they take those low blows when it comes to rightfully critiquing someone. And before I was able to say that about anybody else, I had to be honest that I was doing the same thing. You know, sometimes I've had dudes say really nasty things about me, and my instinct was to say, like, well, you need to get laid, which is funny, but it perpetuates this idea that, you know,
Jordan Peterson has something to say about that, Franchesca. No,
why did we need to speak?
Sorry.
We did not. But when we say things like that, while it might feel gratifying in the moment, we're perpetuating this idea, especially when it comes, you know, to those conversations around men and what we're seeing happening right now in the media with, like, incels, for example, that it perpetuates this idea that if a man is not, you know, having lots of sexual partners, that he's some sort of failure, right? And so while I might have very valid reasons to express my anger or discomfort with somebody who's saying nasty things about me on the internet, my words are affecting lots of other people, not just that one person. And it's really hard, especially when the person is, like, white feminist personified, when the person is, you know, the leader of the free world and has his hand on the button and possibly could kill all of us.
And probably will.
I don't need to say anything about him potentially having, like, a small genitals, right? Like, that has nothing to do. But, like, there's so many other things that we could say that should rightfully be said. And again, I realized for myself when I looked back on some of the ways that I was starting certain conversations, I just didn't feel really proud of those things. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna spill the tea on myself in this book and hope that people say, you know what, I can do better as well when it comes to having these conversations.
Well, it's so interesting because we've reached an inflection point, not just in terms of how we talk about race and gender and how jokes are perceived and said in regards to those things, but a whole different slew of issues as well. We're realizing that a status quo had been perpetuated by how we joked about each other and how we talked about each other.
Absolutely. It's because now people that necessarily didn't have a space to talk about themselves or tell their own stories in media are now able to. You know, for me, it was really kind of eye-opening when I went back and watched some TV shows and movies that I really enjoyed.
Oh my God, yeah.
You know, it's like you watch Ace Ventura: Pet Detective and you're cringing the entire time because it's like full of homophobia and full of, you know, the scary trans person gender reveal at the end. Whereas at the time, like, it was totally okay to laugh about those things. And now we're realizing, like, there's actual consequences to that, especially now that we see, unfortunately, so many trans women of color, you know, falling victim to violence. But now we have so many celebrities who can talk about their experiences and open people's eyes in a way that needs to happen.
Why hasn't Jim Carrey said anything about Ace Ventura? I know that I think of it. I do feel like, you know, he's got this whole thing going on right now where he's painting the members of the administration in satirical ways. I think he should step forward and be like, I know it's kind of a funny movie sometimes.
Jim Carrey, if you're watching, which I'm sure you are, because you're obviously a fan, we're reaching out to you and asking you to make a statement.
At least for the end of the movie. At least for the last scene of the movie.
But I forgot that was part of the film, right? I don't want to I mean, it's 2018, so I can't really spoil Ace Ventura: Pet Detective for you. But there are so many movies where, like, the reveal was like, it was actually a man, right? And that is something that, again, has, like, serious real-world repercussions when you think about how often trans people are dealing with people trying to assume what their gender is and potentially getting violent with them when they're not happy about the answer, you know? And again, I had to acknowledge, like, I made a super transphobic video not realizing, I was like, guess if I'm a man or a woman? And I thought it was so funny, and somebody had to call me out. And so for me, this book is really about the fact that it's super uncomfortable when people hold you accountable for your screw-ups, but it's also part of our lived experience, and we need to make mistakes in order to learn from them and move forward.
People's true characters aren't revealed when they offend. They're revealed when they respond to offending other people.
Put that on a card or like a journal.
That is stolen from somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I say that on a very personal level because I, as a straight white guy who likes to joke around all the time, I know I have, and I'm sure I have without even realizing it, totally fucked up. Yeah. And sometimes when someone
I didn't know we could curse. I would have been dropping mad F-bombs.
When someone says, like, hey, you offended me.
Sorry.
It's hard sometimes to be like, to really come to terms with it.
It is so hard. The minute that you say to someone, hey, what you said really hurt my feelings. You know, for me, it's so funny. Every time I've encountered situations where I talk about privilege with someone, you get the traditional, like, what? One time I broke my leg in 3rd grade and I couldn't go swimming. And you're like, but that has nothing to do with the fact that you have privilege, you know? And they're like, my parents got a divorce. Okay,
my parents worked really hard for their money.
Absolutely. And it's like the idea that privilege doesn't mean that you've never had to work hard or you've never had hardships or everything has been handed to you is one that a lot of people are just not familiar with. So for me, I really try to talk about my own privilege and the fact that I am straight and able-bodied and I can use any restroom in the city without any problem because I don't need an accessible bathroom, right? Like, that's not my fault, but I have to understand and acknowledge that so that when I use the restroom, I don't take up an accessible stall because I'm not thinking about the fact that someone actually needs this stall, not just because there's a great mirror in there, right? So, if we talk about our own privilege first, I found that helps a lot of people, and it's those types of tips and learnings that have come from me doing it the wrong way that I felt like was so important to highlight in this book.
Have you ever found yourself having to get over that hurdle personally where, like, for instance, your video that came across or that was transphobic without you realizing it, when someone told you that it was transphobic, were you immediately able to reconcile with that?
No.
Were you like, no, I wasn't.
No, are you kidding me? I listed, like, every trans person I'd ever met in my entire life. I did the the defensive, like, no, that's not me. Like,
that wasn't my intention.
No,
so
that wasn't my
must be you.
intention.
Yeah.
And that's, you interpreted it the wrong way. I did all of like the typical things that we do when we find out that we hurt someone, you know? And of course, like, unless you are like a dominatrix, most of us are not intending to hurt someone. And I affirm, and I am totally okay with whatever consensual things you like to do.
Because any dominatrixes were offended by that moment.
No, absolutely. But I mean, the point is usually we don't mean to hurt someone, right? And so it's really hard for people to separate the fact that your intent does not change your impact, right? And I didn't mean to hurt you, but I still hurt you. And I think, again, if more of us were honest about the fact that we've made mistakes, it would be easier for other people to acknowledge those mistakes rather than just going straight to, here's how you screwed up. It's like, I've screwed up too, you've also screwed up, let's fix it together.
You have a great moment in the book where you talk about meeting one of your trolls at VidCon. Yeah, and it's honestly,
learn from my mistakes. Don't do it. It's not worth it.
So obvious what happens with this person.
Yeah,
it's like almost if you had written it in a movie, people would be like, maybe give it an angle.
Yeah, you're like, I know where this is going. It's really interesting because, again, the thing that the internet is so prime for is that often people are presenting themselves in a way that they wish that they were, right? And that's why it takes like 30 selfies to get that one perfect selfie. Like, that's not who you really are, right? Like, that's a perfect, refined version of yourself. And I feel like that's the same when it comes to people, unfortunately, who spend their time online trolling and saying hateful, nasty things. Like, they are presenting a version of themselves online that they wish was who they were. Someone that is confident, someone that's like smacking people down and telling it like it is. I found that those people are not.
Why do so many people want to tell it like it is? Why do so many people have this, mostly men,
I just feel like tell it like
weird urge.
You said it, not me, thank you.
Have this weird urge, like, I just tell it like it is. Nobody wants you to tell.
I also just feel like that's a cover for when people are hurt by things that you've said. You're like, I'm just telling it like it is, okay? And I'm just telling you that what you just said was really fucked up or really inappropriate or offensive or whatever it is. It's like a cop-out, right?
Who deemed you the one to tell it like it? You know, that's the thing.
Who will be this teller of is?
Yeah.
Let them come forward so we can all partake. Like, no, sir.
Me.
Yes, I will take up the mantle and tell it like it is. I have no idea.
Well, anyway, we were talking about meeting your troll.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, I think it was a good learning experience for me in the sense that it was just a reminder that oftentimes the people who are really negative online, it's because they're unhappy offline. And I think that that should be something that is painfully obvious, but for me, I think I just needed that like in my face reminder. And I think it's also just made me a little bit more aware of what I put out onto the internet, because when you're having a bad day, of course, you're gonna take it out on the internet because it's easy and it's accessible and it feels really cathartic, but I don't necessarily always know that it's the most productive thing to do. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who have quite literally dedicated their entire career and online presence to just being really nasty and hateful. And now, you know, you can
president.
Yes. Now you
become president off of it.
Yeah, you can make a living off of it. You can create an entire career off of it. And it's very scary, but for me, I'm really trying to focus on the small sliver of hope that more people are using social media to have important conversations and fulfill their dreams and talk about things that need to be spoken about that maybe they're not seeing in mainstream media or just telling their own personal story.
You said you say at one point in the book that you stopped using social media or not stopped using, but you limited your use. You pulled back.
I did.
So that you could be productive. I think it's insinuating so you can be productive to write this book. Since you've finished the book, have you dove back in?
I've been on that self-promo book tour grind. It's a hard balance because I found, again, when I was stressing out or I wasn't happy in my career, like the internet really kind of became a crutch for me. And so I would turn around and I had spent 5 or 6 hours on Twitter, like arguing, and it didn't make me feel any better. Like it might have felt good in the moment. Oh, I see you're like smiling. Someone in the audience is like, at me, sis. No, it's true. It's like you're not having a good day. You're stressed out about something, or you know something is terrible happening in the world, and it feels really good to have a community that's supporting you, and you're all having this shared experience about whatever it is. But for me, I found that it just made me feel bad rather than feeling good. And so I just needed to step away. And I was at events or at parties, and I was thinking more about how to capture how I was feeling at that party for the internet rather than actually enjoying the party. I wasn't able to actually like focus on what was going on or have productive conversations with people because I was thinking about like who's going to take the picture so I could share on Snapchat and let everybody know that this party is so cool. Like
or I can snark on it or something, yeah.
Right, and again, like that's not to begrudge how anybody else uses social media. Just for me, I realized that it didn't make me feel good. It wasn't productive. I was wasting a lot of time looking at what everybody else was doing. And again, I think that that's kind of what social media is about. Like, here's where I am. Here's this great outfit. Here's the thing that I'm eating. My dog is really cute, whatever it is. And I was looking at that instead of like creating the life that I wanted in reality versus like creating like this false life for the internet.
The book is titled, Memoirs and Mistakes of an Accidental Activist, and it really starts with this video that you put out, which you didn't even intend to sort of make you an activist.
No.
But how would you describe it has made you one, and how would you say you've stuck to it?
Shit White Girls Say to Black Girls completely changed my life, and I mean, I would not be sitting on this stage. I wouldn't have written a book. I wouldn't have had all these awesome opportunities if I hadn't made that video and it hadn't gone viral. But what I didn't realize or anticipate was that I was starting this global conversation about privilege and what it was like to be a person of color in predominantly white spaces. And I did not have the language to talk about what I had done. I got invited to be on Anderson Cooper. It was my first national television interview. I'm very proud of that interview, but when I look back at it, I cringe because, I didn't have any help. I didn't really know how to talk about what I had done, and I just feel very thankful that there were a number of people that reached out to me and really kind of set me on the right path so I could really harness the talent that I didn't really understand that I had, and that I can talk about important topics using pop culture and analogies and humor to help people understand them. And so I accidentally stumbled into this path, but it's one that I'm very thankful for and I feel very proud of.
What's been the hardest part of staying on that path? Trolls?
No, the thing is like the idea of a troll, like I feel like we all have trolls in our real life, right? Like you have that family member that has something to say. Like when you get a new job, they're like, oh, you think you're cute with that new job? And you're like, yes, I am cute. I now pay my bills. Like what? Like, aren't you supposed to be happy for me? And now I'm not asking you for money. But like we all deal with those people, but I think what's even harder is the negative thoughts that we have about ourselves, and especially as a woman, as a Black woman, it can be really difficult to quiet those internal fears that are just a result of the messages that are being told to you every single day about your appearance, about your intelligence. All of these things are really difficult to overcome, and especially when you have an awesome opportunity. Imposter syndrome is a real thing where you get the opportunity and you're wondering, does everybody know that I'm not actually supposed to be here, that I'm not actually funny, that I'm not actually talented, I can't do this? I mean, I was literally having that at 2:00 this morning, if you go on my Instagram story. That's not a joke, thank you. No, it is a joke, but I was stressed, I was just laying there like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? But I think those things are very natural and they keep you humble and grounded. I would rather have a little bit of self-doubt and nerves than to think that I'm the shit all of the time. But the point is that you move forward past those feelings and you don't let them overcome you and keep you from doing what you need to do. So it is really difficult to get up there every day, especially because people are going to have something to say no matter what, right? They're going to be people that read the book just for the purpose of not liking me. Thank you. And there are going to be people who do like me and maybe aren't happy with some of the things that I said or feel disappointed or see me a little bit differently. And I can't control that. But what I can do is continue to try and push forward and learn and grow and be the best person I can be.
Easier or harder to do it every day with a bigger or smaller fan base?
I don't necessarily think that the fan base makes a difference, because I think there are people that don't have any online presence, and they are having the same struggles when it comes to self-esteem and pushing forward in their careers and in their relationships and conversations with their family. I mean, it's human nature, right? Self-doubt, again, I think is something that is natural, but I think that that humility is good, especially as an artist. I think that it makes you more receptive to bettering your work and creating things that are going to resonate with your audience. So I definitely think like the pressure of having millions or hundreds of thousands of people watching makes it a little bit more difficult. But at the end of the day, you know, if you create things that make you feel good and that you are proud of, and also if you create like a little team for yourself of people that hold you accountable and are honest with you, then I think that, you know, you do the best that you can do, and that really speaks for something.
Let's get some questions from the audience. Who's a question? Hi.
Hi, Franchesca. How are you?
Good.
I'm glad to meet you. Wow, you're so much pretty in person.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There's a whole team behind this.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to meet you because you inspire me to create more content for my YouTube channel. I'm a YouTuber. I love all your video. And I want to know what will be your message for the people who are scared to be, to show in the world what they really are, because this is a problem. But for, you know, I'm from Latin America, and there the people are not too much like open mind. So
yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely something that everybody wrestles with, especially when it comes to social media and the potential for lots of people to see you and have something to say. I think that's something that you have to work on, you know. Self-confidence and self-love is a process. It's not something that you just wake up one day and you like who you are. It's something that you work on. It's a daily struggle for me, to be totally honest with you. I have good days and bad days like everyone does. You too. So I would say for people that are struggling and feeling worried or nervous about putting themselves out there, you know, you can't push yourself to do something you're not ready for. And if you're not ready today, maybe you'll be ready tomorrow or 3 weeks from now or months from now. And also, your version of visibility might be different from my version, right? Maybe you're a singer and maybe you can use your music and collaborate with another creator, or you can do some sort of visual work, or you could do voiceover. There are so many creative ways that you can create content that don't have to push you past your comfort zone. Not everybody needs to be like a talking head. Not everybody needs to write a think piece, right? Your way of sharing your message and telling your story is completely unique to you. So I would encourage people to figure out what feels authentic and right for them.
Next question, right here.
Hi. So I knew you were a contributor and writer on the Larry Wilmore show. Did the writing on that show help with the writing of this book? And were you thinking of on that show? Was there some thoughts of political correctness and what the topics were on that show?
Yeah, so the Nightly Show was an amazing experience for me as my first TV writing job, and I'm so thankful that Larry believed in me. You know, I think oftentimes people are very critical about folks coming from the internet and going into mainstream media, and so I had a lot of times where I was really nervous there, and I was feeling like, oh my gosh, if I get this wrong, people are going to say, like, YouTubers can't cross over.
That's also being surrounded by joke writers, too, I'd imagine, is
some of the
really
funniest, most talented writers who've now gone on to write for, like, Colbert, and, you know, there's just so much talent that was in that room. But I was really fortunate that my first writing experience was with a bunch of people who were really supportive, you know, and after every episode, Larry would sit down with us and give us feedback about our performance, and that was something that I had never had before, and that just was so awesome. So I learned a lot there, and just learning how to turn work around really quickly. You know, we were doing a show every single day. Even if I wasn't on camera, I was still part of the writing staff. So just the need to kind of be able to take a story and distill it down in a way that's really digestible, that was something that I had kind of gotten good at on Decoded, but with the Nightly Show, I was having to put it into somebody else's voice, which is a challenge, right? Like, Larry is very different from me. He doesn't want to tell as many Beyonce jokes. But it's really good to learn how to write on an assignment, where someone might give you something and say, write about this, and it's not something I really wanted to write about or had any interest in or knowledge of. But there were a lot of great skills that I got out of that experience.
I think I have time for one more.
Hi, I'm wondering how you dealt with being so vulnerable in writing your book, or if you kind of use that as a strength, seeing as it's coming from you and not something that people are deducing from like a public persona.
I mean, in all honesty, it's something I'm still kind of nervous about, right? But I do think that that is a strength in a way that for me, like oftentimes when I look up to people, you see them as this perfect, infallible, they've done everything right, they have all these great opportunities, and unfortunately you kind of start measuring yourself against that person, and you think like, wow, I'll never be that talented, I'll never be that successful. And oftentimes I wish I knew the story behind how that person got there. And so for me, that's what this book was really about, was to say that if anybody is looking at me and saying, oh, I wish I could be like her, I wish I had those things, to know that it didn't happen overnight. I made lots of mistakes. I had lots of times where people said no, or I thought this was the end of my career. And it's scary to be honest about those things, but the potential for it to help and inspire people is so exciting for me, and I feel like that outweighs any fears that I had about sharing those stories.
Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.
Really great. It was a joy to read. I think everyone's going to love it. It's on shelves now.
Yes.
Amazon, Strand. Go to the Strand. Go to the Strand.
Yes, support your local bookstores.
Yes.
There's also an audiobook, and of course, I read it. But sometimes people don't read their own audiobooks, but I did, and it was really fun. And so I'm excited to hear what people think of it.
Franchesca Ramsey, everybody. Let's hear it.
Thank you.